Welcome to American Dreams. My guest today is Aaron Manoucheri. Welcome to today's show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Aaron, can you share your background and your family, how you got to where you are today?
Sure, heavy question, but happy to dive in. My name's Aaron Manoucheri. Our family history on my dad's side goes back to Iran. It moved over in the 70s. Very different time when the Shah was in power. It was more of a democracy rather than I think a terrorist regime today. A lot has changed since, but we were initially in the pharmaceuticals, colognes and fabric business, as well as properties in the Middle East. My father came over in the early 70s, very upset due to what happened to his country, and essentially had to start over. He spent many years working at Marcus and Millichap, learning the U.S. markets, and that was the segue into the U.S. markets and our footprint in California today, New Jersey, Florida, as well as Israel. I'm one of eight kids born to my father. He's still married, thank God, and travels quite a bit. We have three of four sons in the business. We essentially run Florida while he runs point on California and New Jersey. Currently standing on a little over $2 billion in AUM of multifamily assets, all for the most part value add, with a few select properties that are core and core plus. What that means in short is fully amenitized, newer properties. And our strategy is buying gold at a discount, value add, top locations, all with an immediate access to the city, and top MSAs that are distressed or mismanaged or a combination of the two. And we've been doing this for a long time. I'm the third generation in the business alongside my two brothers. My mentor's my father, and a few other folks with white hairs on their head. That's who I look up to. And happy to make the time today to share some more insight. Well, thank you for having me.
So, the Manoucheri Brothers is a fully integrated family business. And for listeners who may not be familiar with that term, could you explain again what that means? I think in a lot of family offices, transitioning wealth from one generation to the next, not always easily done. What's your secret sauce there? How do you, and it's like you mentioned about the vertical integration, interacting with parents and children and, what is your process there to make sure that it is able to succeed?
Great question. I guess I'll give you a personal answer. Maybe it'll help the audience as well. In our family, there was never this concept of resting on your loins. I mean, sure, we have a good time when we travel, but 99% of the time we are working. We essentially don't stop. And we have this mindset. I call it the immigrant mindset. So even though we've been here for quite some time, and I was born in California and raised in Beverly Hills, my mindset's never been either of my brothers that we're set and everything is hunky dory. My dad, growing up, gets up 4:30 in the morning. We get up a tad later than that, but still the early morning hours, where we have a morning schedule that involves prayer, fitness, cold plunging, and then we head to the office after we've taken care of those essentials to then create new energy to go into battle, into the workforce. We're on the front lines between acquisition, management, and construction. All three separate companies under one arm tending to these properties. And that's a full-time job. Even when we travel, we have our phones out in the later hours of the day or the mornings, whatever it may be. But in this industry, this isn't industrial with a triple net e-commerce, tenant where you're just collecting a check. To create wealth in multifamily real estate, you have 2-3 years of intensive work in renovating these properties, stabilizing them to then be in a position to refinance them. So it's not that you're buying something and you're cruising out the gates. People don't realize when they invest in these buildings, what's going on the back end of their investment, who's doing the work, who's there every day, day in, day out, day out, working on pushing the net operating income of these properties. And that's done through showing up even when times get tough and even when you're comfortable, or, one of the two, whatever it may be. So I think it's really work ethic, fear and love of God, and family structure and respect within that structure that enables, this legacy to continue. And I've met with sixth and seventh generation families that tell me the same thing. And I'm happy to expand on this, but this is, I think, a brief summary of my take of what it takes.
In the family, you mentioned you got separate lines of business, the construction or the development and the management, the oversight.
Yes,
Uh, is there a special approach that you guys have used to defining who is going to do what's niche within the company?
correct. That's precisely it. Each son has their own entity, their own list of responsibilities. So my older brother is the CEO of everything we buy, on that side of the coast, and he's hyper focused on finance. He has an MBA out of NYU Shack. We call him the nerd. He's a good looking guy, but he's stepped behind a 48-inch curved screen with two analysts under him, full time running numbers, verifying current financials, anything relative to how to create value and building new companies that also tend to the properties. Yosef, my younger brother, heads construction and development. He speaks 7 languages, I think, a few different dialects of Spanish. So he's able to communicate with the laborers in their own native tongue, what Colombian, bits and pieces of Portuguese, regular Spanish, Cuban, whatever the dialect may be. He's able to connect with them, and that really helps with labor costs, access to materials, and paying numbers far below market. That enables us to save money when we're infusing cash for capital expenditure items. Myself, I'm all operations and investor relations. So that means day to day budgets, day to day leasing, um, turning units, negotiating with vendors, and then building and mending relationships with family offices that we essentially do deals with directly. So they co invest with us. I fly a lot, hence the little airplane in the background. Um, and I do that with a smile because if you want to build a business and expand your footprint, you need to stay relative. And that means being out there in the limelight. And that's myself, although I'm trying to get my other siblings to join me, which they are. And we each have our separate suite. We don't cross over only for bigger decisions. And that's what enables the ship to run. And whenever we want, real advice, or we'll speak amongst each other, and last resort is we'll go to our father to hear his opinion on something vital. I think that's really the recipe or formula for long-term sustainability in a family dynamic versus having different siblings, chewing at each other or fighting because they're all doing the same thing, or they all have a very similar skill set. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
So turning the page here,
Sure.
economic outlook for this year. What do you see going on in your industry?
It's funny you say that. I was in the gym this morning watching the markets tank, and part of me was like, "Oh man," but the other part of me is actually same with my siblings and my father, quite optimistic. With the new administration, yeah, there are some bumps in the current situation, but I do believe this is tactic and negotiation. It's the similar tactics that we use when buying buildings or portfolios. Is you hedge yourself and you kind of play poker face, based on where you're at in the negotiation process. The good news is the T-bills, which we look closely at, is in a very, they're in a very good position today. Prior to this administration, they were fluctuating by 30, 40, 50 basis points every other day, which made it very difficult to identify a cap rate. But now we're seeing more consistency, and we like that the current administration is attacking inflation at its core versus artificially correcting it, which is a short-term fix by simply cutting the Fed funds rate. Rather, they're actually looking at where we can save money in the government and where we can renegotiate deals with our neighbors and or allies. And I think in the long run, that helps build a stronger economy from within. And it requires patience, but we're actually prepping to refi a few buildings, and we remain quite bullish in acquiring new properties, which we have about 2 or 3 deals in the pipeline now. as we speak with one closing. So I would say quite optimistic.
They're in the news that they're keep putting out the whole market's ready to tank, and I think Florida has a lot of different pockets of communities with stuff on the market. So, would you consider it more of an opportunity as a buyer coming into some of those areas right now, picking up properties, or what's your take on it? Is it do you have to be selective on the communities you're moving into, or
Well, Florida is not all gold. I mean, it goes by zip code. We don't buy in markets that are further up the coast, like Jacksonville, Tallahassee, Ocala, and these areas that are quite tertiary. Our focus, as it was in California, is primary and secondary markets. So that means anything that has immediate access to the heart of that specific market, whether it be Tampa, Miami-Dade, or similar. And these markets are more vibrant and protected during recession versus the other markets I mentioned, and many others are the first to usually tank during the correction. We want to be collecting rents no matter what, day in, day out, with free market rents. And the way we identify those deals, for the most part, about 95% of them are off market. Uh, and that's through having strong connections through the course of 60 plus years of doing this combined generations, and that enables preliminary offers, owner to owner, or owner rep to buyer rep direct, with no one in the middle. And that's really through credibility, reputation, and I would say principles, and the ability to close quickly. So if you can come in with cash in hand, and you can find a distress opportunity without anyone seeing it, or only one or two competitors, and you wipe the floors with them, assuming you're still buying at a good basis, that it could work. But we don't generally look at widely blasted or marketed deals, unless we were in talks in the beginning and something happened along the way. But in this business, you don't want sloppy thirds or fourths. You want something untapped. And they're very difficult to find. The last deal that we did, to your question, took a year to find. And but thank God it worked out, because we ended up assuming a 9-year note that was fixed at 4% and change for at a 9-year term, with only 50 something percent LTV in it, which is Fannie Mae backed. And that's something in our space that's incredible. You don't see something like that today. But happy to expand on that. I hope that answers your question.
okay. When you're looking at your personal, professional life, are there a set of values that help to guide you in making decisions?
Oh, that's a heavy question. I like it though. I will say that not compromising on your principles. I'll give you an example. During COVID, when the Fed funds rate, for all those in finance that understand what I'm saying, we look at it closely. It dropped to nearly half a point or less, I believe. And during this period of time, debt was essentially free. You could buy a home at 2%, 3%. You could buy a property with similar debt. The issue at hand was that brokers suddenly said, hey, you can utilize such leverage. That means you can pay more. So suddenly a 6 cap market became a 2.53 cap market. There were some deals in Miami-Dade that traded at a 2.6 cap, which is absolute lunacy. And I had mutual contacts, let's call them, when I would go to these conferences to speak, or for select meetings. They would boast. They'd say, Manoucheri, look what we bought, 2,000 units, 1,500 units. I'm like, gentlemen, respectively, what did you pay and what's your capital stack? 90% LTV. We took a bridge loan. We're going to go bridge to HUD. We'll refi out. What happened? They are underwater or no longer exist today, because the Fed funds rate since went up 11 times in that period. That's about 5.35. So the rates went from 3.4 to 9% if the rate caps burnt out, which left them and their investors totally diluted or destroyed. There are no shortcuts in this business. It requires tremendous discipline, and it's not easy. But that's when we look to our elders and we look to each other to bounce ideas. And thank God that discipline exists with us. And it requires more patience to source yield, but thank God we're not in a rush to do anything stupid. Uh, yeah.
So, Aaron, when you're looking at your own legacy, what do you hope to leave for the next generation, both in business and in life?
Sure. Um, we already today are teaching our sons, at least I am, about the business. My eldest is Isaac. He's a very wise kid. He's only a few years old, but he knows what I do, and he asks questions. And they see us rise up early in the morning to, to go study the Talmudic law, the Torah. We got the First Testament, to go pray, to go to the gym, to stay fit. And they see the family dynamic when we sit at the table on the holidays. There's nothing in the world like it. There's nothing in the world I would trade for it. It's having a legacy and having all the cousins being close together, a sense of unity and peace and harmony. We take that energy and we put it into the business. And in this line of work, you need a lot of energy. You need to be a fighter. That's the only way. It's a world of wolves out there when it comes to sourcing, deals and actually taking them down. It's not an easy feat. People just see the highlights, say, "Oh, so and so closed this, so and so closed that." But what it takes is having a backbone. The family dynamic is the backbone. Take that and combine it with God, and you have the perfect formula to sustain through the good times and the bad.
I love that. If I could just ask a question about that foundation in God, your grandfather came over after the fall of a regime at the Shah from Iran. And I think that, in terms of journey, a lot of people are interested in, tell me your spiritual journey, you're finding God. Any advice that you can offer to others? Like this world's getting a little crazy right now,
Yep.
right? And people that just put a foundation in wealth and material items often find it to be somewhat hollow. What advice could you give uh, to others?
I would say that carrying the baggage alone can destroy a person. When we turn to faith, and we turn to God, and we do a constant analysis when we're in such places, it relieves one of that baggage. So when you come to the office to sit with your employees, you bring a different energy to work. You're not reliant solely on yourself. Yeah, you have tools, you have AI, you have systems in place, you have people in place that you oversee in day-to-day operations, but that's not what I solely rely on. Above that, there's something far greater, which I cry out to daily, 3 times a day. And that's, that for us, for all of my siblings, and I learned it from my father and he learned it from his. In fact, we became more, I would say God-fearing and observant over time, because as the company grew and more assets and more value was attained, more stresses came with it. In fact, there's a saying um, in the Talmudic teachings that the more property one owns, the more worries. So what do you do about the worries? You just carry it in a backpack and you bring it to work and drive everyone crazy? Or do you have a system in place that helps you push through and process, those issues so you come set, with a mindset to push forward? For us, that's the combination of prayer, study, and fitness. I think is very important to keep the mind healthy. And we hope that the result of that is longevity and continuity in the family. For us, these points are vital.
Aaron, it's been a pleasure having you with us today. Person who's interested in learning more about your opportunities, sometimes you do collaboration with other family offices, I understand. How would they go ahead and reach you?
Sure, you can find me on LinkedIn or just type my name in on Google. I should pop up somewhere. And my cell and my email's up there, quite accessible. And I'm happy to meet with the right individuals and share more on what we do.
All right. Thanks for being with us today here on American Dreams.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.